Great news, Andy. Ali Khalifa is eligible. It shouldn't be a story, but it is. You know why? Because NCAA.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Monday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your host. That's the man, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch. And we want to remind you, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out, by the way, to all the everydayers here with us and all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Andy, quick side note, tomorrow is July 1st, and that means the start of all the house settlement initiatives going to be NIL going ourselves to death. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to start today by talking about Louisville and Ali Khalifa being eligible. We'll get into a couple non-con schedules after that. North Carolina officially releasing theirs last week. Georgetown, I think, earlier last week, if I remember correctly. Incidentally, these two teams play each other in the non-con, so it's a match made in heaven. Andy, last year with the whole coaching carousel, Ali Khalifa left BYU with Mark Pope, figured he would go to Kentucky. He did, but to the state of Kentucky, not the school Kentucky, wound up at their arch rival, Louisville, redshirted with an injury. Andy, what happened from there that makes us now have to get to talk about this?
Yeah, it was a weird situation. Obviously, Ali Khalifa, he spends 2 years at Charlotte, the mid-major level, and then he transfers to BYU, has a really great season for Mark Pope and the Cougars, and then it's the transfer portal again, lands at Louisville. But like you said, he redshirted last year, and there was some rumblings that maybe he was getting healthy and potentially able to contribute down the stretch, and ultimately Pat Kelsey and the Cardinals shut him down or never activated him, and he didn't end up playing at all last season. And then as the offseason gets underway, we get word that the NCAA has determined that Ali Khalifa has actually exhausted all of his college basketball eligibility and that he is ineligible to play for the team this upcoming season. It's very obvious that Louisville brought Khalifa in with the intention to have a redshirt and then play this upcoming season. And just because they had that plan doesn't necessarily mean that the NCAA has to honor it, but it certainly didn't seem to make a ton of sense about a month ago when we talked about it on the show of like, hey, what's the real reasoning here? And Khalifa had redshirted his first ever college season at Charlotte. So he redshirted a year at Charlotte, played 2 years, played another year at BYU. So that's 4 years, and then sat out last year at Louisville. That is 5 years. So the NCAA does have a 5-year window where you have to complete your 4 years. But one of those years, the redshirt year, was COVID. And then this year he was legitimately hurt. And we've seen players getting 6th years and 7th years. I think it's Devin Cambridge has got a 7th year of eligibility to go play at Central.
82 years actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, Chad Baker-Mazara started playing college basketball 4 years before COVID, I think. Like, it's just like there's the inconsistency in terms of applying these rules has been something that's frustrated fans about the NCAA for literally since the NCAA existed as an entity. But this one just felt particularly egregious. It felt like Louisville was getting a little bit picked on. It felt like Khalifa was getting a little bit picked on. And obviously we don't know all of the kind of details on the inside, but one of the things you and I talked about was this kind of has to be reversed, like or somebody has to come out and give us a darn good explanation for why he's played 3 seasons. Like he is, yes, I understand there was 2 redshirt years, but he played 3 seasons. He had every intention of playing this season at Louisville. And thankfully the NCAA did the right thing. They reversed the decision, or he had a waiver approved. He will play this upcoming season, and it was very cool. Pat Kelsey got to make the announcement in front of the team during a Friday morning team meeting, and it kind of resembled those videos that probably every one of you listening to this show have seen at some point, where a walk-on finds out that they're on scholarship. By the way, those kind of videos going by the wayside after the house settlement. That's maybe a conversation for another time, but Kelsey Kelsey
Good
talks
word.
about how invaluable Khalifa was to the culture of the team and kind of made it seem like, oh, like, we're so sad he's not going to be with us. And then he said at the end, like, but he's, we just found out he's eligible for next year, and everybody jumped on him. And so it was a cool moment, a cool opportunity for the team to celebrate Khalifa. But as you kind of alluded to, this shouldn't have happened in the first place. Like, there was no need for this back and forth and confusion and stress of what I imagine the last month has been like for Aly and Coach Kelsey and everybody. And I'm glad that it's resolved, but it didn't need to be this way.
It didn't need to be this way, Andy. Like, as you said, it's a cool wrap up, and glad ultimately it happened like it happened, and glad they had that fun team moment on Friday. Like, that's just special, and he'll remember that, and they'll all remember that.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't have had to do it, like you said. But you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones. No, I can't let bygones be bygones. Like the NCAA, man, come on. Just be consistent and just do things that are sensible and make sense. Like oh my gosh, Andy, it drives me banana whackers. It drives me bonkers. But they've got him, and it's weird though. I don't know that I necessarily move Louisville up, because I've always assumed that the logical thing would happen and he'd get to play. So I always kind of had him on my roster for them. Like, when I make my top 25, I already kind of accounted for him. So it doesn't really do much to move the needle for me with Louisville, because the needle was already at Ali Khalifa or whatever you want to say. But Andy, as we look at this roster now, and we now know that it is in fact with him on it, what do you kind of make of the makeup of Pat Kelsey's second Cardinal team here?
Yeah, I think for me, they really needed him back. And I'm with you. Like, my rankings kind of reflected a Louisville roster that already had Khalifa in the mix. And if it had been determined that he could not play, or if, God forbid he gets another injury or is unable to play next year, like, this Louisville roster, I think they really need him. Like, I think I know that they're lacking in front court depth, especially experienced front court depth. And that's why Khalifa, I think, is such a critical part of this roster next year, because they're returning Kason Pryor, and that's huge. He's great, but and he's more of a stretch four type, similar to Khalifa in some ways, but Khalifa's a big body and a great distributor, and I think he adds a lot of value in what his skill set is to this Louisville team. But outside of that, I mean, they got a couple international freshmen coming in who have some size, but none of them, I think some of them are fairly highly regarded, but I would be hesitant to assume that any of them are the best. There's a freshman on this roster who's going to contribute right away, and that's Mikel Brown, but he's a guard. He's a point guard. I don't know that I trust the internationals to give you a bunch of, like, if you needed those players to give you 25 minutes a night, I think that's a risky proposition for this Pat Kelsey Louisville team. And I think having Khalifa and Pryor takes the pressure off of those young guys to not have to come in and play big minutes right away. So I think that this is a huge gain for Louisville. But like you said, it doesn't change my rankings, because I kind of already had the assumption that at some point they're going to figure this out and Khalifa will be a part of this roster next season. Because, I mean, it's pretty clear that this team built that Kelsey went out in the transfer portal. I mean, he went out and got three guys who are tremendous three-point shooters in Adrian Woolley, Ryan Conwell, and Isaac McNeely, but none of them are bigs. And I think it was pretty clear that Kelsey was building this roster with the assumption that he would have Ali Khalifa. And if you're a Cards fan, you're very happy that he gambled right on that.
Dude, you think about that. Ryan Conwell and Isaac McNeely, Woolley, and Mikel Brown coming in to join. I mean, this backcourt is going to be insane, Andy. I can't wait to see how he unleashes it, unveils it, utilizes it, whatever you want to say. Like, it's just so much at his disposal. Getting Kason Pryor back, man, I hope he is good and healthy and ready to go, because I remember how excited we both were for his contributions to Louisville last year and how good the Cards were able to be even without him. And so I know there's several guys out the door, a lot of guys out the door, I should say. But I think he's going to be a critical part of this team. Kenai Ruths, who was a freshman last year, I think showed some good stuff at times. And I think he can step in and play an important role for this team as well. And that, leaves several we haven't even mentioned there. But no reason Louisville can't operate at or above the level they did last year, assuming health, obviously for guys with both Khalifa and Pryor. But man, very excited for what's going to happen in the Center this year.
Well, Isaac, we're sticking with the ACC. Moving on here, North Carolina's non-conference schedule. It's out, and honestly, it looks wildly different than last year's gauntlet, and that may not be a bad thing. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf out on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game just a little more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned out on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right out into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. Since we've been talking Louisville, plus 2,000 for Pat Kelsey and the Cards to win the national championship in 2026. If this Khalifa news has you juiced for the Cardinals, those are some pretty good odds there. As a reminder, the two leaders right now are Purdue and Houston, both at plus 1,000. And folks, if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, as we talked Louisville, we talked about the return of Aly Khalifa, sort of return as in he was told he was not going to play for a month. Now the NCAA walks it back and he's going to play next year. It's big news for the ACC, and we want to talk about some other ACC news here. The North Carolina Tar Heels release their non-conference schedule. And as we said, it does not look like last year's where they had a ton of super marquee games, tons of high-quality opponents. And while it's easy to say, well, they're not playing those marquee teams and that's a bad thing and blah, 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 I think that there's some good and some bad with North Carolina's decision-making here on this schedule. What say you?
Yeah, Andy, it's funny. When I first saw this schedule, I've been piecing it together for a while now. Mm-hmm. Forgive me. It looked like a bit of an correction,
Yeah.
Of like, man, there was this crazy thing last year that included Kansas and Auburn and Michigan State and Alabama and Florida and UCLA. And it was just like, and that's not to mention Duke, right? And so that's 4 games against 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Just in the regular season, they played Duke again. So I guess 5 total games against 1 seeds.
That's crazy.
During the regulars. And so it's like anybody should recalibrate after that, Andy. Mm-hmm. But RJ Davis is out the door, a whole bunch of changeover. Literally the only returning players are Seth Trimble and James Brown, who was a little used big. Mm-hmm. And I guess you could say 3 Zayden Hyde coming back off of suspension from last year. Mm-hmm. And so there's wisdom in changing what you do. But you look at it and there's 13 total non-conference games because the ACC went back to 18. 7 of those 13, Andy, so more than half are bye games. Central Arkansas, Radford, NC Central, Navy, USC, Upstate, ETSU, and ECU. Plus, they'll play St. Bonaventure in the Fort Myers tip-off. That's not really a bye game. It's an A-10 school, but it's not a high major. So you could almost say 8 of your 13 are bye-ish games. But Andy, when we look at what teams are doing, I think there's probably a lot of wisdom to this scheduling format. From a, it's probably wiser from a scheduling standpoint. If they had 1 or 2 more wins the past 2 years, maybe things look a little bit different from a bubble standpoint. It's probably also wiser, as I said, from our only returning players are Seth Trimble and James Brown standpoint. And also from a Hubert Davis's seed is a bit warm standpoint, Andy. And so while at first I thought it was an overcorrection, I'm going to pull back on that and say it is more of a proper correction, Andy, is where I'm landing on it right now.
I think for me, I would have a hard time complaining about a non-conference schedule that includes Kansas, Michigan State, Kentucky, Ohio State, and Georgetown. Like, I understand every other argument that you made, and I understand that the 6th best school outside of those top 5 is St. Bonaventure, and then after that, it takes even a bigger drop.
Navy maybe is
yeah, but like I think it's Navy, but this is not that unusual. Like a lot of teams, and I know that, you kind of expect a little bit different from your blue bloods, and that's what we saw last year with North Carolina's schedule. I mean, playing the one seeds a collective 5 times is insane. That is that's probably a record or close to a record ever. Like that does not happen very often. So I think that correction, like you said, was going to happen. I think the reasoning behind why there's correction completely makes sense for Hubert Davis's job security, for the fact that this is a new look roster without a lot of returners. And I think it's important to acknowledge that they are expected to play BYU at BYU in an exhibition game. We don't have a date on that yet. It's probably going to be October 24th, but like BYU is going to be a ranked team throughout the season. Most likely you get a crack at Dibansa right off the bat. So I don't have any qualms with this schedule. I understand it entirely, and I think it makes a lot of sense for North Carolina to do this and kind of be in a position where they scale back a little bit because of what happened last year and because of the roster overhaul and things like that. But I don't think that this is a weak schedule by any stretch. And again, I think if you were to pull the majority of high major teams that have 13, 14, 15 non-conference games, often about half of them are bye games, and the other half are rarely as top heavy as Kansas, Michigan State, Kentucky, Ohio State, and Georgetown, which is, I think, why this North Carolina schedule falls in a positive spot for me when evaluating it compared to other programs. Maybe compared to North Carolina's history, maybe that changes the equation a little bit, but I think this is a very quality non-con.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's crazy. Andy, sorry, I was looking something up while you were talking. You might have said it, but they're playing 3 of the 4 Champions Classic teams in the non-con. And the only one they're not playing is because it's Duke, who's in their conference. So they'll play the Champions Classic teams 5 times in the regular season. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on with everything you've said there. Andy, also, it's kind of crazy. This is going to be the first ever meeting between Kansas and Carolina in Chapel Hill. Like, how have we gone through all this great history of blue bloodery and that's never happened?
Yeah.
So, and then Andy, one kind of observation I've made, because I'm kind of I like to look at schedules and historically and how they piece together and where things are going to fall. One of the things is that the ACC has had, similar to the Big Ten, an early conference game. They've only done 1 while the Big Ten has done 2. One of the things like where it would fall historically is where that Georgetown game just got slotted. We knew that Georgetown game was going to be December, but we didn't know the 7th until the schedule came out. Historical data would say that there would be ACC games that Saturday and Sunday, December 6th and 7th. Andy, my conjecture is that means that the ACC is not going to play early season or non-conference conference games this year. Here's why I say that. I doubt we'll know for sure until we get the ACC schedule out. But the early ACC games started that same year as the ACC 20-game schedule, with the ACC reverting back this year to the 18-game schedule. I think that means then that they're doing away with that, and that full chunk of 18 conference games are going to be all together, other than Duke, who obviously is going to play a February non-con game, and Louisville, Michigan. Against Michigan, that's right. And then Louisville, who we now know is also going to play a February non-con game. Baylor, is that right? Yeah. And so I love seeing that trend. And so actually, it's funny, we might see it flip to the other direction.
Yeah, very, very excited about this North Carolina schedule. Very excited to see the ACC potentially going away. Like I kind of like the conference schedules all being together, and I thought it was kind of. I know a few conferences do that, and obviously the longer schedules, it makes sense for like the Big Ten to do this. But I think you're absolutely right that North Carolina and Georgetown, the timing of this matchup, along with the fact that they've typically not had these early season conference games when they had the 18-game schedule, makes me think you're probably right about that. And I think that'll hopefully be lead to some more fun scheduling stuff for other ACC schools.
Well, Andy, speaking of Georgetown, Ed Cooley and the Hoyas are ready to compete in the Big East in year 2 for Coach Cooley, putting together a non-con that's definitely going to challenge them more right away. Let's talk about it in just a second. Andy, kind of cool to be able to talk about these 2 schools that are actually going to play each other in the non-conference portion of the schedule. And also, it's kind of funny to talk about Carolina's gauntlet last year. And let me remind you of Georgetown's non-con schedule from last year, Andy. They went 9-2, but here's why. Versus Lehigh, versus Fairfield, versus Notre Dame, one of the two losses, versus Mount St. Mary's, versus St. Francis, versus Wagner, versus Albany, versus UMBC, versus West Virginia. That's the second loss. At Syracuse, that was the win. And then versus Coppin State. Andy, one true road game, Big East, Big 12, and their only losses were to West Virginia and Notre Dame. But teams at Ken Palm ranked the wins 283, 334, 243, 309, 346, 275, 299, and 115. That's good. And 361. Andy Patton, I think Georgetown is going in the opposite direction of North Carolina this year, making it a bit harder.
Yes, they had nowhere to go but making their schedule a little bit more difficult. But a big shout out to them, because a lot of the teams you just named, I do see on the schedule again, UMBC, Coppin State, a couple others that you said, but they also have some much trickier games. I think for starters, they only have 2 true road games in their non-conference slate, but they also have 2 road games in their exhibition slate. They are playing George Washington on the road on October 18th, an exhibition game, and then they're going to Rupp Arena to take on Kentucky in what I think is going to be a really fun exhibition game on October 30th. Obviously, anytime you're seeing a game at Rupp, it's going to be exciting, but I think that's going to be a really fun one. So 2 tough road challenges in the exhibition. I think I like when a team like Georgetown is willing to do that. And then you got a road game against Maryland on November 7th. This is the first home game of the season for the Terps. It's also the first time these two teams have played each other in almost a decade. They played each other last on November 15th, 2016. So very cool to have those two teams playing each other once again. The Hoyas also started a home-and-home series with Clemson, who they will play at home this year on November 15th, and then on the road next year. And then they are playing at North Carolina, as we talked about, on December 7th. So very, very cool to see this team be willing to play some more tricky games, some more challenging road games in particular, but also setting up a trio of home and homes. The Clemson and North Carolina series are 2 games. The Maryland series is scheduled to be 4 games. And then they're also part of the ESPN Events Invitational in Florida. The 3 other teams in that event are BYU, Dayton, and Miami. So some quality competition for Ed Cooley's team there as well.
Yeah, Andy, and it's just, a lot of times when we look at these non-conference schedules, we learn what a coach thinks his team is going to be or going to need, perhaps. Yeah. And so this schedule would signal to me that Coach Cooley believes his team is at least somewhat more ready to compete than they were last year. And that's encouraging, right? Like Georgetown's one of those programs where I think it's better for college basketball when they're good and when they're competing. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And so, Andy, I think that leads us to then ask the question, do we think the Hoyas are ready to compete in the Big East this year? What do you think about that?
I think it's going to, this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but it really depends on how quickly Ed Cooley can get the pieces for this team to kind of jive together, because the majority of the talent on this roster next year is going to be coming out of the transfer portal. And that's with incredibly no disrespect to Malik Mack, who is outstanding, excellent player coming back in the mix. But like, they added some really high profile players in the portal, and this is going to be an older team. They have a couple of sophomores who are expected to step into bigger roles from last year. But for the most part, this is a team built on veteran guys. And I think that's part of the reason Cooley's like, yeah, let's go play on the road. 3 of our first 4 games, if you count exhibitions, are true road games like that. Like, let's go do it. Like, let's go prove that we can do that, because we have these players coming in who, played in the Big 10 or played in the Big 12 or played in the Big East last year. And I mean, I'm looking at this 6-man transfer portal class, and I really like it. Again, how do the pieces fit together is the question. I could see this going really well for Georgetown. KJ Lewis, very, very talented player coming over from Arizona, had some one-and-done buzz before his season with the Wildcats. Langston Love's a great pure shooter from Baylor, had some injury issues, but is very talented when he's on the floor. Deshaun Harris-Smith from Maryland, Jeremiah Williams from Rutgers are both quality guys coming over from the Big Ten. Vincity Wachukwu from St. John's, and then Isaiah Abraham from UConn, 2 guys who have some Big East experience from some programs that have had a lot of success recently as well. So I like the class. I like the veteran experience. I think we've seen Ed Cooley turn programs around after a couple of years. I think the timeline kind of lines up for Georgetown to really make a push for it this year. That said, I'm probably not going to project them in the top 4 in the Big East, maybe 4th, maybe 5th, somewhere in there. But I think this team's going to be improved. And any year that you're getting further and further away from the Patrick Ewing coaching era is a good sign for Georgetown. And I think this team is pretty clearly headed in the right direction.
Yeah, Andy, it's crazy. Like if you look at Bart Torvik's projections, not him personally, but his algorithm, 9th in the Big East, behind DePaul. DePaul is the team right ahead of them. And so I feel like that is low.
That feels a little low to me, yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm not saying they've got to be a ton higher, but I think, where you said 5th, I'd probably go more 6, 7, 8. I haven't started to go like deep on the Big East yet, but it's going to be really interesting to see. Gosh, one of the things I am so hopeful that poor Langston Love can be healthy and play a lot of basketball this year. Like that guy, just in and out so much. But I think, KJ Lewis could have a big year. A couple guys back, you talked about Malik Mack, Julius Halifanoa, came in with some international experience. Caleb Williams coming back. It's crazy that he's given up his QB1 spot for the Chicago Bears. I don't know about you, but I'm still shocked that he made that decision. Where are you at on that?
Right. I mean, you got to pass up NFL money to go play for Ed Cooley, right? I mean, that just seems like a slam dunk.
Honestly, it makes a ton of sense. No, I really hope that things in our nation's capital are going to be looking up. But it's tough. It's tough. You've got these Big East teams that have been better lately, and Georgetown has just not been. And I don't know what it's going to take to get that brand back there. And there's just so much to aura and vibes and stuff. And I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. And I think like Cooley, he brings some of that from Providence, but it's a different vibe. And I think that it's still kind of trying to figure out like how much of that is Ed Cooley bringing like his vibe and the culture that he wants to build. And then obviously just Georgetown having this rich basketball history. I think it's kind of finding how to make that mix and match as best as possible for this team. And, I think looking at this roster kind of once again and kind of flipping through the players who are returning and stuff, I'm really interested. A player that I've had on the radar for a long time is Julius Halifanoa, who's a freshman last year, who didn't play very much, had some injury stuff, but he's a kind of a connecting big that I think could play like I hesitate to even say this name out loud because he's not, it's an unfair comparison, but play like a Nikola Jokic type role where he's kind of utilized away from the rim and can use his size to make plays and make passes and kind of do that stuff. And I think he's a player that had that pedigree coming out of high school. And it was a little bit of a surprise he went to Georgetown. And I'm really interested to see if he can kind of have a breakthrough, because if he does, if he becomes the kind of player that I think a lot of folks thought he could be, that is a massive boost to a front court that right now is what I would have as my biggest question mark for this team. I mean, Iwachukwu comes in, he's a big, but he hasn't played a ton of minutes in his college career and hasn't proven a ton at this point. And I think if he's your kind of your obvious center and there's not a lot of depth behind him, that's a bit of a risk, especially in the Big East. But I think if Halifanoa can take a step forward, this team could really make some noise. Again, are they going to finish 4th? Probably not, but I'm pretty confident that on paper, at least, this roster is better than 9th too. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where within that spectrum they fall, if they fall in that range.
Andy, let's end with a mea culpa for me. I think earlier in this segment, I said it was Ed Cooley's 2nd year upcoming. I've thought long and hard. This is going to be his 3rd year. And so I apologize to Ed Cooley for shortening your Georgetown tenure.
I think
Patton.
I think he'll get over it, but it's a good apology to issue nonetheless. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Fantastic show as always. Love getting a chance to look at these schedules and kind of, like you said, what it means for these teams and maybe what these coaches are thinking or hoping for their program coming into the year. Like we said, that's going to wrap it up for us today. We'll get some NIL Go coverage coming your way as the calendar flips to July. We'll get some summer league stuff, more recruiting conversations, some conference realignment, as we know that's coming up here with the calendar flipping over to July again. So lots of fun stuff to cover here. But as we always want to end the show, we got to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until Tuesday, peace out.